So let's get to our next guest. And this is extremely powerful. So this is Rodion Sulyandziga. Belongs to the Udege community, one of the indigenous peoples of the North Siberia and Far East of the Russian Federation. The total population is about 1,600 left. Udege means forest people. And Rodion, in a quote, says that I have started my political career since 1987 to protect our land and forest rights at the local level and continue my advocacy at the domestic and international arena. I want to know much about this. Over to you, Gasali.
Thank you so much, Carson. Rodion is, in my view, one of the most very experienced indigenous diplomats out there, not just from Russia, but indigenous peoples in general. Also, what a lot of people don't know, he is very good at ping pong. We had a ping pong tournament while we were in New York as a lobbying team for the World Conference, and he beats everyone, every single one at the World Council of Churches. Aside from that, thank you so much, Rodion, for being on this webinar series. Let me start off because you're such a strong person, such a strong personality. What is your greatest strengths, if you're willing to talk about that, and how has that impacted your career trajectory since 1997?
Yes. Hello, everyone. Ghazali, Carson, and our distinguished co-panelist. I'm so glad to see all of you safe and secure under this time. And but first, before moving to your question, Ghazali, I would like to thank you and your team, and congratulations with a great idea to connect Indigenous United Nations and create a new dialogue and exchange virtual platform to keep Indigenous solidarity, to touch governance and diplomacy under this pandemic time. And also, Indigenous people should use the new technology as a new tool to protect and promote human rights of Indigenous peoples at different levels. And secondly, I also would like to thank you for different languages interpretation service provided in terms of access, inclusiveness, awareness, and also regional and cultural balances and visibility. And so I'm so pleased to contribute to this global dialogue to empower the Indigenous diplomacy and movement. So with regards to your question, it's easy, but it's also difficult question. I was born in a completely different political situation. I was born in Soviet Union. So, and this time it was a completely different political agenda. And then we saw the demise of Soviet Union. We saw the era of perestroika and the current situation, and we did a lot of hopes. So, and of course, my greatest strength, it's my family, it's my people. It's a very small community, it's only 1,600 left. And also my first job was a teacher and principal of school. After the university, I got a good Soviet education and came back to my community, working with young generation. So, and this is my biggest strengths, my family, my people, and my advocacy.
No, thank you so much, Rodion. And I apologize to you because I would love to have just it was challenging to put the right number of Russian interpreters in here, but I'll promise you next time around, definitely with you and Pavel, we'll definitely make sure that we have that feature covered. Rodion, I've always said it, you are in a very special position lately, because you're both MRIP member as well as the facilitated working group member on the local communities and Indigenous Peoples platform under the Climate Change Convention. So the way that I see it, I should not say the way that I see it. What are you hoping to bring to both sides, human rights and climate change?
Yes, you're right. I'm current members of this both United Nations venues. And on the one hand, these are two completely different bodies under the United Nations structure and space with different and specific agenda and mandates. But on the other hand, there is a quite strong synergy between them. Because, you know, MRIP is a human rights division focused on the Indigenous Peoples and human rights under the Human Rights Council and led by Indigenous people experts in order to protect and to provide a solid, strong studies and recommendation for human rights bodies under the United Nations. But on the other hand, if you look at the UNCCC, in particular, presentation working group under the climate global negotiation, our aim is to humanize climate change impact and commit human rights based approach. So, and it's helpful to promote both agenda under both United venues, because climate change is also human rights agenda. But what is more important, we as Indigenous peoples, we should move forward from the status of victims of climate change to originators of sustainable development and solution agenda in order to create a strong climate resilience community at the global level, and particularly at the local level.
Rodion, I remember you saying 3 words that are very important to you: respect, recognition, and remedy. Very 3 important themes for, if you can, of course, each of the 3. What would you like to see at the end of it? How would you like to see that? Any thoughts on, any thoughts on that? And what could be like the first step for Indigenous peoples?
Obviously, respect and recognitions of Indigenous people rights and their traditional rights, their land rights, is a cornerstone for global IT political agenda to protect and to promote human rights of Indigenous peoples. And of course, we can celebrate the United Nations achievement for the last 2 decades. We already mentioned here the UN Declaration on Indigenous People Rights, creation of expert mechanism, permanent forum, and other thematic venues on climate change, on the CBD, and others. But the era of colonial time is not ended, because when we are talking about remedy, we are talking about the resource colonies represented by the big industrial economy and government, particularly looking at the indigenous land as a marketplace or marketable commodity to be used for the economic growth and profit. So this is triangle: respect, recognition, and remedy based on the colonial and post-colonial period. How we can create completely new agenda based on the human rights recognition.
Thank you so much for giving more context to that. Do you have any ideas on that new agenda? Is there something that you really would like to see?
Of course, we should work together and to increase our global diplomacy, our joint solidarity. But unfortunately, there are still growing gaps and obstacles between global, regional, national, and local community level. So, and a lot of work to do, and we should learn, we should work together in order to increase all our skills and diplomacy at all levels.
Thank you so much for unpacking that, Rodion. If you're up to, if you're having ideas on this, because this is something that have been on my mind for a while now. Like, Russia is a very big and very diverse region. Not just talking about the country, but the indigenous region. So how do you understand and utilize representation of indigenous peoples in Russia? What do you think are the challenges in that? Any thoughts on that?
Yes, Ghazali, it's a very good question, because if you would like to talk about Russia and its indigenous peoples, we should have some kind of historic background and look at the also Soviet time and pre-Soviet time, and also at the current situation. Because through the Soviet era, we never raised the issue of our land rights, our traditional knowledge, because all Soviet regions with indigenous people population had been effectively de-indigenized, assimilated and integrated into the Soviet society based on the paternalistic ideology. And after the collapse of the Soviet Union and its system, indigenous peoples took on the second life for the first time. And we as indigenous peoples of Russia, we were one of the last to join the United Nations agenda and to the international indigenous peoples movement. So, and that was a great time of hopes, how we can work together, how we can seek better ways of preserving our identity and land. But if you look at the modern story of Russian indigenous peoples, sadly, it's a story of a conscious strategy of erasing indigenous communities from the Russian landscape in many ways, socially, politically, legally, through the folklorization of indigenous rights. And today, the Russian state policy is more inclined to remove the last obstacle standing on the way of its Arctic dreams, because our traditional land is so rich of natural resources, and the Russian economy and power is still based on the exploitation of natural resources. We are not stateless, but we live in the shadow of the states. Geographically, we are living in a very remote areas from both federal and regional capital center. And politically, we are still marginalized and at the margin of power. And demographically, we are fast disappearing. If you look at the statistics, we have more than 12 indigenous groups with a population less than 1,000. So, and from my point of view, while we were among the last to join the United Nations agenda and the global IP movement, we can become the first to quit it due to this authoritarian regime. And it's getting more challenging and risky to oppose the state propaganda machine and smart aggressive diplomacy. So how can the country which has not ratified any legally binding documents on indigenous rights be pointed as an example of successful indigenous policy? For me, it's still a mystery, but it's also the reflection of the real situation in my country.
Rodion, thank you so much for giving us like the full your view of the situation in Russia at the moment, challenges, and also like what you would like to see. Anything the Indigenous Peoples movement at large, allies, can help you with, that you can see that can really benefit the Indigenous Peoples movement in Russia?
Well, I think it's also a big issue related to diplomacy and governance issue. And what kind of diplomacy we are talking about? You mentioned ping pong we were playing many years ago. But from my prospect, diplomacy is also political ping pong with two roads ways. But I believe the indigenous people's diplomacy is having only one privilege: to tell a true story and to tell untold and unreported stories. And of course, we need solidarity from other indigenous peoples. And we had to learn so fast and so quick after USSR collapse. And we are still learning a lot from other regions. And we appreciate very much our first international contact, particularly with our Arctic indigenous brothers and sisters like Inuit, the Second Polar Council, and Sami Council. So it's a very unpredictable and very serious time. But we should be optimistic and strengthen our capacity and also diplomatic skills at all levels, at the international, but also at the domestic one.
Thank you, Rodion. Any final things that we might have not touched upon that you really want to talk about, curious about, or want other people to think about? We have like 90 more seconds. So anything that you really want to bring forward?
I have some observation and also recommendation for your great job and this how we can follow up with a virtual conference created by your team, Ghazali. And there are three, I believe, key issues from my point. I believe in youth and education. So we should increase youth participation and educational, provide more educational opportunity for young people and young leaders. The second point, it's very timely to raise the issue and to promote, protect not only cultural heritage of indigenous peoples, but also natural heritage. And there are many reasons, including climate change. And we must keep our planet and our natural heritage for the sake of the planet. And finally, I would like also to recommend you to continue such kind of episodes and bringing together also a group of friends of indigenous peoples to elaborate more the governance and diplomacy issue, and also trying to invite strong international lawyers working for indigenous people rights and protection.